Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kevin. I am an intern of OC Habitats, and I'll be hosting our presentation and happy hour today. And joining us for this presentation is our guest speaker, Christina Robinson. She's kind of a superstar in the environmental world. She's the education coordinator at OC Coastkeeper, as well as the tide pool educator for Laguna Ocean Foundation. And she even started her own foundation of Plastic Me Not. And she's also volunteering at many different organizations. She's working at the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium doing their whale watch program. She's doing the Southern California Sea Turtle Monitoring Project with the Aquarium of the Pacific. And she's volunteering at the NOAA Fisheries West Coast region and as well with us at OC Habitats with our monitoring projects. So without further ado, here's Christina Robinson here to talk about microplastics and pollutions.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me today. So without further ado, we will start talking some trash. So we originally created plastic to be an end-all solution in the early 1900s. It's so durable, we're able to add a lot of different types of chemicals to get those different types of plastic properties, right? So we can have plastic that is hard and brittle or soft and flexible. We know that plastic is so durable, it almost lasts forever, we can reuse it, but unfortunately it was just so cost effective and so affordable to be producing new plastic. It's really become this disposable item that it is today. So we really started making a lot of it around World War II. So since the 1950s, we've created 8.3 billion tons of plastic with only 9% of that being recycled. And we'll talk more about why that number is so low a little bit later. But first, it's difficult to even imagine that much plastic, right? It's hard to visualize even a pound of plastic because it's so lightweight. So I have that Eiffel Tower there for you as a visual. 8.3 billion tons of plastic would be equivalent in weight to over 800,000 Eiffel Towers, or also a million African elephants. So we've produced quite a bit of this. In the mid-1970s, our global plastic consumption was around 4.5 pounds per person per year and has increased to around 95 pounds per person per year today and is still increasing. According to National Geographic, if we continue consuming plastic at this rate, we'll have about 12 billion metric tons in our landfills by 2050, since so little of it is being recycled. We're still currently producing over 300 million tons of plastic every year, half of which is for single-use plastic. So these are all those plastic items that are really meant to just have that one purpose. We're oftentimes only using them for a very short amount of time. So things like single-use plastic straws, utensils, and a lot of our food packaging and containers. Unfortunately, most of the single-use plastic isn't even recyclable. So it's really contributing to that recycling issue we have around plastic. It's important to note that plastic is a byproduct of oil and natural gas and also requires other resources to make during production. So if we think about one single-use plastic water bottle, it can actually take up to 6 times the amount of water in that one water bottle, plus a 1/4 cup of oil to produce just the one plastic water bottle. And right now it's not really effective in even recycling those little bottle caps, right? We're not really able to do that in most places. We're still seeing that, more than 8 million tons of plastic are finding its way into our ocean every year. And we'll talk about how it gets there a little bit later as well. With all this plastic entering our marine environment, we're seeing that 1 in 3 species of marine mammals are being found entangled in marine litter. Oftentimes these are things called ghost fishing gear or derelict fishing gear. So these are all of those nets, pots, and traps that are discarded and irresponsibly managed by fisheries. We're also seeing that over 90% of seabirds are being found with plastic pieces in their stomach. And this is because all of this plastic waste is ending up in the environment and the habitats that they're foraging. But also remember, I mentioned how we add different types of chemicals to make different types of plastic. Those chemicals can also change the weight and density of plastic, but also can create a scent or a smell. So some of this plastic actually smells like the type of food that these birds are hunting for. Of all of the trash that's floating in the ocean, 90% of that is plastic. It's also really important to note that plastic is not biodegradable the way that we use that word today. When we think of something that's biodegradable, a great example would be leaf litter. So a leaf that's falling down to the ground, it's going to rot, decompose, break down back into organic material and nutrients that nature can then reuse and recycle. Plastic's never going to do that since it's made from oil and chemicals, right? It's just going to break down into tinier pieces, and we'll learn more about that in a little bit. With all this plastic that's ending up in the ocean, we're seeing our North Pacific fish are ingesting tons and tons of this every year, and that our Great Pacific Garbage Patch is now starting to outnumber our marine life 6 pieces of trash for every 1 organism. Here in this picture, we're actually looking at the Wintersburg Channel at the Bolsa Chica wetlands. So we are looking directly at the Wintersburg Channel, which serves the cities of Westminster, Fountain Valley, and Garden Grove as part of our storm drain system for any time it rains. This helps prevent flooding. But you can see this channel is then connected to the Bolsa Chica wetlands, then goes to Huntington Harbor, and that water then goes to Bolsa Chica State Beach and Sunset Beach. Here we have this yellow trash boom, and so it's helpful in preventing a lot of this trash from entering the rest of the body of water, but you can see that it's not 100% effective. We have that plastic bag on the other side. It's also important to note that this is only going to be preventing that floating trash from entering the wetlands, which is good. We want that because we do want, we have animals moving underneath here, so we kind of need a surface protector like what we have here. And here's a nice graphic kind of showcasing those different types of plastic materials and whether they float or sink based on those different chemicals that are used during production. I've always been surprised, that plastic bags float, but yet plastic film will sink. So it just depends on what chemicals are used during production. So here is some more trash that I've seen at the wetlands, which makes me super sad. It's a sensitive habitat, really critical for a lot of our wildlife. Here's trash that I've picked up in my neighborhood. I live in Fountain Valley, so I feel very responsible for that trash that ends up at Bolsa Chica wetlands. This is trash that I pick up when I go surfing. I always try to pick up at least 5 pieces of plastic when I walk back to my car and encourage my friends to do the same. So much so that a lot of them will do that when we're not even surfing together now, but I encourage everybody to pick up, 5 pieces of trash whenever they can do so outside safely. Here we have some trash that I've pulled from the tide pools, which really bums me out because a lot of those organisms aren't really leaving the tide pools, they're staying there, so they're having to live in this pollution. Here we have the top 10 types of trash found at beach cleanup. So this comes from a lot of different organizations that do cleanups like Coast Keeper. We send this data to the Ocean Conservancy to kind of see what types of trash we're seeing and that's ending up at our beach. So what's interesting to note is that all 10 of these items are made of plastic. Even our cigarette butts, those little filters are lined with plastic. It's also great to note that these are all examples of single-use plastic items. Up until 2019, cigarette butts ranked #1 for years and years, up until food wrappers took that #1 spot. This has really just been intensified with the pandemic since we're having to order more takeout, are unable to use reusables as often, and a lot of restaurants are having to use more single-use plastics for things like condiments that they normally wouldn't have. One thing I'm trying to do to help mitigate and reduce that is anytime I'm ordering, takeout, trying to remember to say, hey, no, thank you. I don't need that straw. I don't need utensils. I have some at home. And then because of COVID restrictions right now, anytime they hand us our food, we're unable to give that back to them. So I'm really trying hard to remember like, hey, just wanted to double check that there's no plastic in here. I'm trying to reduce before I receive my food. I definitely don't remember every time, but practice makes perfect. Another type of litter we're seeing from this pandemic is PPE litter. So there's now a lot of face masks and gloves that are everywhere, unfortunately. So if you're using face masks that are, single use or you're disposing of those afterwards, please cut those ear straps to help prevent wildlife entanglement. Even if we're properly throwing those masks away, we're never personally, following our trash to its final destination. At my apartment complex, when our dumpsters get serviced, oftentimes I see a lot of leftover trash that doesn't really get taken care of. So easy things we can do to help prevent more entanglement. Earlier, I mentioned how 8 million tons of trash is ending up in our ocean, 8 million tons of plastic specifically. So how is it getting there, right? This is just a reminder that we all live in a watershed wherever we live around the planet. Even if we're in a desert or not close to an ocean, we all live in a watershed. A watershed is going to be that area of land that just drains all that water and sediments back down to the ocean via gravity. And so in our area, we have a storm drain system to help prevent flooding. And so while it's very, efficient in preventing flooding, unfortunately, this is how 80% of our trash is transported from our neighborhoods and places up the watershed. They then make it all the way back to the beach because water is so heavy. This picture here is actually from Seal Beach, which is notorious for getting a lot of trash after it rains. We're seeing that of all the beach litter worldwide, 73% of that is plastic as well, and that 90% of plastic in the ocean is coming from these 10 rivers in Asia and Africa. I think sometimes people hear that last statistic and they think, well, who cares? Not my trash, not my problem, or that's on the other side of the world, so why should I care? But it's really important to note that the United States actually makes the most waste worldwide of any country. So we should be actively trying to reduce that waste production and managing that waste better and being more responsible about it. We used to actually send a lot of our plastics and recycling materials to China up until 2018. Since then, we've been sending a lot of these materials to countries in Asia and Africa, oftentimes which they don't even have the proper infrastructure to handle those materials. So some of that trash could very well be ours. And just like we all live in a watershed, all that water is connected, right? I know we're taught that we have 5 oceans. It's 5 ocean names. It's really one big ocean because all of that water in the ocean is eventually going to circumnavigate the planet. Really just connecting us all, and we all depend on the ocean as an important resource for so many things. So again, here's an example to show you how that storm drain system works. This is a neighborhood in Santa Ana. So any of this trash or litter is going to get, moved into a catch basin, whether it rains, when it's windy, or when we are using too much water outdoors, right? And we have that urban runoff. So we can, reduce our overwatering to help prevent this too. But anything that goes in those catch basins or gutters is going to end up in an underground storm drain or an above ground storm channel, ending at the ocean and oftentimes in our wildlife. While beach cleanups are really helpful as a last-ditch effort to prevent marine debris, doing neighborhood cleanups is so helpful in preventing that trash from getting there in the first place, right? It's really hard to pick up a lot of this trash and plastic and styrofoam once it's broken up into a million pieces. And so I'm sure some of you have heard of our Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's good to note it's actually 2 distinct patches that are bound together by the North Pacific subtropical gyre. We're seeing that more than half of this trash is coming from land-based activities in North America and Asia, compared to 20% coming from water-based activities. It's also important to note that 70% of this marine debris is actually sinking to the bottom, so we're only seeing what's floating. Sometimes this is referred to as a trash island. It's much more of a plastic soup, as we can see this scuba diver here moving through it. It's also important to note that unfortunately, we don't have just one garbage patch. We have one in every ocean. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is just the largest, so it's the most well known. And here you can see the 2 distinct patches and how they are bound together. Earlier, I mentioned how microplastics are how plastic cannot break down into organic matter and nutrients, right? It's just going to break down into these microplastics. And so these microplastics are these tiny little pieces of plastic, almost like a sesame seed size or a single grain of rice, technically less than 5 millimeters long, and some are even smaller than that, known as nanoplastics. A huge source of our microplastics are going to be microfibers. So microfibers are these tiny little plastic fibers in our synthetic clothing materials. So things that are really comfortable, really affordable, like spandex and polyester. But you can see that the diameter of these fibers is a lot skinnier than our organic clothing material. And so what happens is when we are washing our clothes, that spin cycle agitates these fibers, they start to shed, and all the water that we use indoors is part of our sewer system. So anytime we're doing the laundry, cooking, taking a shower, or using the bathroom, all that water is part of that sewer system, gets sent to a wastewater treatment facility where they filter and treat that water before it goes into the ocean. But unfortunately, right now, we're unable to remove these microfibers and part of that process. Here you can see some samples I actually collected of microplastics under the microscope a few years ago when I was looking at coastal benthic samples. So I was just looking at the ocean sediment, trying to sort out fish eggs and different invertebrates, but I kept seeing these little plastic pieces and fibers and started keeping them because this was really my first exposure of realizing how ubiquitous this microplastic is and this plastic pollution problem is. So again, here's some organic material. You can see that blue microfiber running through it and another black microfiber here. Where are these microplastics being found? Unfortunately, everywhere, every body of water, our deepest ocean trenches, ice core samples, air pollution, and even our soil, as well as things like packaged tea, table salt, tap water, and bottled water. Here we have another example of a primary source of microplastics, which is nurdles. So nurdles is how we ship plastic for production. So these little tiny pellets you can see often look just like fish eggs, and oftentimes there's spills during manufacturing, and then they end up everywhere. Here's a graphic showing a study that was looking at different water bottle company brands, the manufacturer, and then the country tested looking for microplastics, right? And I share this with you because I want everyone to know, just because there's also microplastics in some tap water, we don't want to be buying this bottled water if we don't have to. The average amount of microplastics they found was 325 pieces in these water bottles. And so especially here in North and Central Orange County, we have really safe, clean tap water due to our unique partnership with the Sanitation and Water District, utilizing our aquifer, our underground water storage. And so again, we have very clean, safe tap water here that we should appreciate because we don't have that everywhere in this country, not even in California. So maybe you don't like the taste of your tap water and you can just use any type of a portable charcoal filter to change that flavor. So I have like a portable Brita filter, and then I can just use tap water and, reusable water bottles. These bottled water companies are pretty much just bottling tap water anyway. And it's important to note that our tap water is much more regulated than these bottled water companies. And so once they bottle that tap water, they just add their own unique blend of minerals. And that's what gives it that unique flavor, right? That's why Dasani tastes different than Aquafina. But you can buy your own minerals as well, right? If you like that flavor. If we're continuously buying this bottled water, it's just increasing that consumer demand. It's keeping the cycle going, adding to this plastic pollution problem and microplastics, and just keeping that plastic tap on. So we really want to avoid that as much as possible if we can. If I'm going to an area and I don't know the quality of their tap water, instead of buying a whole flat of 30 plastic water bottles, I'll just buy like a 2-liter jug, and that way at least it's reducing that plastic consumption. And that's what I do when I'm camping or anything where I have to be bringing in my own water. Some other sources of primary microplastic sources are going to be microbeads. So these little polyethylene plastic beads that used to be in some of our personal care products, things like face wash, soap, and even toothpaste. The Obama administration passed a law in 2015 banning this in production, but we don't really know how well that's being enforced. So it's always good to be a responsible consumer, read those ingredients before we buy anything. Besides microfibers and nurdles, other primary sources that I thought were really interesting are things like tire dust, city dust, and also a lot of the paint that we use in our marine industry. Our secondary sources will be any type of plastic pollution that's left as litter in the environment. It's going to break down into microplastics through photodegradation. So you can see here that sunlight is going to be making these plastic pieces really dry, really brittle. So they're going to photofragment. Sometimes when I'm doing beach cleanups, I'll see straws that are starting to like shred, or when I pick them up, they're so brittle, they just start to crumble. And so that is this process happening. Mentioned earlier, some wildlife, gets entangled and also ingests some of this plastic pollution. So a big issue with wildlife eating plastic is that oftentimes they feel full from all the trash, but they're not getting any nutrients. So they become malnourished, and this oftentimes leads to starvation. When they get entangled, this can also lead to drowning, especially for our marine mammals, and as well as turtles and, even sharks and things that aren't breathing air. They can kind of panic. And unfortunately, that's what happens. There's currently still a lot of research looking at the chemical consequences from those chemicals that are added and how this can change and impact animal behavior. We're seeing at least 700 marine species being impacted by plastic pollution alone. So this is anything from our tiny little zooplankton all the way to our larger megafauna like whales, sharks, and dolphins. But it's really important to note that this plastic pollution is not only harming our marine life, this is also impacting our wildlife and terrestrial ecosystems everywhere too. Unfortunately, a study came out last year that showed that 88% of these animals that are either ingesting or being found entangled in plastic are already on our endangered and threatened species list in the United States. So these are really vulnerable populations that are then getting hit with this plastic pollution as well. Here we have a sperm whale that was found with 80 pounds of plastic in its stomach in 2019 off the coast of the Philippines. Sperm whales are really deep diving marine mammals, so they use echolocation to hunt for squid, but unfortunately, found all this plastic and trash instead. This is another sperm whale found within the same month of 2019 off the coast of Italy, and unfortunately was also pregnant and found with 50 pounds of plastic in her stomach. So with all this information about plastic pollution and microplastics, it kind of begs the questions, how are we being impacted, right? We already see that a lot of these species found with microplastics are the same species that people are consuming. We're seeing a study done where laboratory mice were fed microplastics and how those microplastics were accumulating in different body organs. And we already know that some of the chemicals used in plastic production are known endocrine disruptors or impact our hormone system, right? Which is super important for lots of body functions our whole life. Some of those chemicals are phthalates and BPA or BPA replacements. So oftentimes I see this now at stores, especially for like reusable plastic materials like Tupperware or water bottles, where it will say BPA free. All that means is that last A molecule was replaced with either S or F. So it's BPS or BPF instead of BPA, but chemically this functions exactly the same as BPA as an endocrine disruptor, if not worse. So please know that when you say BPA free, it still has those chemicals. We also know that when plastic is photodegrading, when it's litter in the environment and it's breaking down, it also acts as a vector. So it's able to absorb a lot of contaminants and pollutants and bacteria that are just in the environment. And we just need to, we need a lot more research to see how these different chemicals and contaminants are moving through the food web with bioaccumulation and biomagnification. We also had a study that came out in 2019 estimating that everybody is eating about a credit card size worth in weight of microplastics every week. And so the good news is that it sounds like we're kind of just expelling and excreting those tiny little plastic pieces. They're not staying in our system, but we really need long-term research to see what's going on with those chemicals, right? Is there any interaction while those plastic pieces are passing through us? We really need that long-term research to see how these tiny exposures over time add up and if they're impacting our health. So this is known as acute toxicology or toxicity. The good news is a lot of these studies have just started, even locally at Costa Mesa at SQUIRP, or the Southern California Water Research Coastal Project. And so while these studies are being done, I like to err on the side of caution. So I'm really trying to reduce my plastic consumption and contact as much as possible. Here we have the crazy no plastic lady again, just highlighting how much plastic we're surrounded by, how much has been items used in the kitchen, things targeting little kids and babies, right? So definitely try not to And I highly recommend not heating up any food in plastic Tupperware. If you're using that for storage, please, heat it up in a regular bowl or plate. But this is a reminder too that we didn't always have plastic. As a society, we can definitely go back to basics and reduce a lot of this. And so before we continue and kind of move from the horrors of plastic pollution and talk about solutions, I'd be happy to ask any questions if we have any.
We did have one about the minerals you use to kind of reduce the fibers and plastics in your water, and wondering where you could get them besides Whole Foods.
Oh, okay. So if you wanted to add minerals to your water, I'm not sure exactly all the different brands and things. I can look into that though and get back to you. I have some information towards the end of this presentation though for different water filters that you can use to filter out microplastics. So that will be covered shortly.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Another question, just kind of in general. Let's say for friends or family who aren't too educated on plastic pollution, what would be a very simple or small change that we could convince them to make that would have a pretty large impact or lasting impact moving forward?
That is a great question. This is something I struggle with personally as well. Sorry, my dog. So I would say the greatest thing to do is changing that mindset with reduce, reuse, recycle, which we'll be talking about as well. But if we can just get everybody to think about how they can reduce their plastic usage every day, I think that would have significant impacts. And it's not something where it's like impossible, right? It's not using zero plastic. It's just reducing and being more conscious about that as consumers when we're buying, what we're using in our daily lives. So that would be my answer for that.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so again, we need more research, we need more data, right? We currently don't even have a standardization for microplastic research and how to compare that with other studies that are happening around the world. But we do have some really amazing human innovation and technologies that have taken place recently. So we have an actual sustainable biodegradable plastic created by the researcher Sandra Pasco-Ortiz from Mexico, where she created a plastic where she's just juicing the blades of this cactus species. So the plant stays alive, super sustainable. She then adds different non-toxic chemicals to create a hard, brittle plastic or something that is soft and flexible. It only takes about 11 days and it can actually biodegrade under a month, which is incredible. My hopes are that we can scale this for food production and it could, help replace a lot of that food packaging. We also have 4Ocean, which is a company where they pick up 1 pound of trash for every bracelet purchased, and the Ocean Cleanup Project that was created by Boy on Slot, where he's actually utilizing the ocean currents to bring the trash to him and his contraption, and then is able to bring that back to land and use some of that reclaimed ocean plastic for other items. We then have the Seabin Project by these 2 Australian surfers, where they're kind of using the same idea, but instead of an ocean current, it's actually happening in harbors. They have like a large metal drum that bobs with the current up and down, and then trash can kind of filter in through it. And I have some pictures here in a second I'll show you. We also have microplastic research that you can do at home known as baby legs. We actually had some students before the pandemic make their own to test for microplastics in Upper Newport Bay. So it only cost them, $10 for these tights that they bought from Target. They then reused some soda liters and had 2 of them to look at these 2 different locations in Upper Newport Bay. And so after they'd filter that water through, they'd flip the tights over, remove any large organic material, and then look at all of that water under the microscope. So you can see these 2 microfibers here and some more microfibers and plastic pieces here as well. They definitely saw plastic in every sample from both locations. And here is that 4Ocean, one of their boats that they have, taking that surface water, skimming it in the back, and then they're actually able to sort out any organic material from what's plastic and trash. This is Boyan Slot's ocean cleanup project. So again, using the ocean's currents to bring trash in here, they can then attach this to the boat, bring it back to land. And he was only 17 years old when he thought of this, which is just truly amazing. And, you know, they weren't even successful with their first haul. They had to go back to the drawing board, figure some things out, and then had their first successful haul in the fall of 2019. You know, it just goes to show you're never too young to help be part of the solution. You can help be part of the solution at any age. And recently, we also just learned about this bacteria species that's actually able to eat PET plastic. And so our hopes are that this is something, you know, that can really help make recycling certain types of plastic more efficient, help create a market. We also have Fiona Ferreira, who won the Google Science Fair Award in 2019 at just 18 years old. He figured out a way to remove microplastics from water using a magnetite powder. He created this ferrofluid that the microplastics bind to, and then he's able to just use a little magnetic rod to remove them all, which is really amazing. And so here's an example of that. And then I will quickly show you some of the highlights here. So this was kind of his microplastic suspension here. You can see he's mixing it up. He's stirred it up, and then he's going to be adding this magnetite powder solution. He then mixes all of that up, so it kind of becomes this conglomerate all together, and then he's going to come back in with that magnetic rod and just remove it all, which is really amazing. He was 87% effective after 1,000 tests, and my hopes are that we can scale this technology for our wastewater facilities to use to help remove those microfibers from our sewage. If you're wondering how you can help prevent microfiber pollution, avoiding fast fashion, those you know, synthetic clothing materials like polyester, acrylic, and nylon is really helpful. Also because fast fashion isn't very ethical with the people who make those clothing. Trying to, you know, utilize more organic clothing materials like cotton, jeans, and hemp. And shopping secondhand is a really great way to do that. I shop secondhand. Actually, this shirt was from the thrift store. And even for items, not just in my closet, but things at home, trying to get more glass Tupperware or different items. Shopping secondhand is super helpful for a lot of ways, good for the planet and your wallet. But some other simple things you can do are just using colder water when you're washing your clothes in a more gentle spin cycle. That will help kind of reduce that agitation and those microfibers from shedding as much, as well as washing things by hand, right? Maybe if it's just like some bathing suits or certain specific clothing items like workout clothes, if you wash those by hand, that's really going to help prevent that shedding as well. We also just want to make sure we're not washing our clothes with hard objects like shoes or backpacks or things, because that just kind of agitates it more. We do have some portable and permanent options for your washing machine as well. So the Coraball and the Guppy Friend are two portable options. The Coraball is kind of mimicking how our coral reefs filter feed. And then the Guppy Friend is a bag that you would put those clothing items into. And so they have different retention rates, but they're both around like $35. The Coraball is using virgin plastic that would have else been wasted. So they're actually trying to help remove that from the system, and you make it for these Coraballs instead from Vermont. The Guppy Friend is made in Germany. And then we actually have the Lint Lover filter, which is a permanent option. If you own your washing machine, it's the most effective, helping retain 87% of these microfibers. And I believe it's around like $120, $150. For tap water, if we're concerned about microplastics, we have Clearly Filtered and the tap water, both examples of that have, you know, portable options like a Brita filter, but they also have items that can either connect directly to your sink or your refrigerator. My siblings live in Oregon, so they bought Clearly Filtered when I told them about microplastics being in tap water, and they actually liked it so much. My mom liked it so much, they just bought her one this past Christmas. When it comes to recycling, we definitely want to be recycling what we can and what's accepted locally. But when it comes to plastic recycling, there is definitely some complications and some issues around it. A quick summary will be that unfortunately, we just don't have a federal standard when it comes to recycling. And so our infrastructure differs city per city. So it's really good to check locally with what items and what numbers your local facility can actually accept. Here are just some examples, 1 through 7. These are those little plastic resin codes. And so number 7 is where all of those single-use plastic items fall under. So a good rule to remember is just that the higher the number, the less likely it is to being recycled. The lower the number, the more likely it is to being recycled. I have some websites listed here. So the OC Waste and Recycling website will actually help you find your city and your municipality that handles your waste and recycle. So you can call them to see what they actually accept. They also have the OC Recycle Guide. So you can, ask like, hey, are bread ties recycled? What items do you actually take? And then TerraCycle is an international company that has a lot of great recycling programs, and some of them are even free based on their partnerships. So they have different drop-off locations or mailing items where it's even, free shipping for you as well based on those different partnerships. So OC Habitats has a great recycling video as well that you can all check out to learn how to recycle more effectively. And I will say too that what I really try to do is just to avoid plastic when I can. Find that plastic alternative like metal can or a glass bottle. It only takes cans 45 to 60 days to be recycled into a brand new can, versus plastic is never recycled that way. It's much more of a downcycling where it has to be shredded, melted. They have to add brand new plastic to it, which is keeping that plastic tap on. And it's usually never going to become another milk jug or water bottle. It's going to become insulation or filler. Anytime I do have to buy plastic though, of course we can't always avoid it. I'll just try to make sure that I'm looking for that number, that resin code number 1 or 2, because in Orange County, that's really all that we're actually recycling is number 1 and number 2. And again, that's just because we have a lack of market. Remember earlier I said that it is it's less expensive and cheaper for companies to produce new plastics. So that's what's happening. And so, of course, we have reduce, reuse, recycle. I'm sure you've all heard that time and time again, but it's just important to remember that these are in order of what's most helpful, right? So if we're reducing our plastic usage and our plastic consumption, that helps decrease that demand for new plastic, helps send that message to companies, that we really don't want this single-use plastic. We can reduce a lot of our plastic use by reusing a lot of items, right? Something that we started doing was reusing all of our Ziploc bags. So we haven't bought any new Ziploc since 2018. We have the same 20. We just wash them and reuse them. It's helping decrease that demand for new ones and has also helped our budget. And then of course, recycling, we do want to recycle those items like paper, cardboard, cans, and glass. But we just learned the issues with, plastic recycling and why it's so complicated and how we're really only recycling numbers 1 and number 2. So of course, recycle what we can when we can, but what's accepted locally. Some new R's are refuse and repurpose. So refusing those single-use plastics whenever we can really helps, again, send that message, decrease the demand for new plastic. And then repurposing items, right? Getting creative, finding ways that we can reuse things like this really amazing patio furniture set made from tires, right? And that way we can help prevent these items from going to the landfill. And also donating is a great thing we can do to also help items from ending at the landfill. I also want to mention greenwashing. This is super relevant right now, especially as we have this zero waste movement out here. Unfortunately, we also don't have any federal regulation on product labeling or what packaging says on it. So companies can kind of say whatever they want. They can claim their product is eco-friendly without providing any actual evidence. So unfortunately, it falls on the consumer, to be doing this research, but at least we know about it, right? We can make sure we're being conscious when we're buying things and really looking into it before just blindly buying. A good example is these earth-rated dog waste bags. They say earth-friendly, they have green on it. The only thing that's earth friendly is this, that cardboard packaging right here, right? That can be recycled, but these bags are 100% plastic. They're even scented. So now there's like more new chemicals in there versus this company, Beyond Green, has these actual biodegradable dog waste bags. You can see here, they even say they're natural compostable, but what's really important is they have 4 different certifications on here. All of these certifications have websites that provide a lot of great information on how and why this product was vetted, and why it's actually eco-friendly. All the companies that are greenwashing use super vague language like natural and, eco-friendly, where if you Google that, nothing's going to come up. There's no actual website. TÜV Austria is my favorite certification to look for, especially because they specifically make certifications for if it's industrial compostable or at home compostable, and then marine biodegradable, right? They're very strict. So I appreciate that. If you're wondering what else you can do, you can, there's lots of ways just to get creative and reuse different items in our home. So I really like yogurt, but was feeling guilty about those single-use plastic yogurt jars. I started to buy it in bulk, and then, use the Tupperware I have, reusing this relish jar to hold my yogurt, adding my own, types of jam and granola just to make my own little parfaits. And so I recommend, reusing as much as you can. We've been reusing all of our pasta sauce jars as drinking glasses or for plant propagation, even like as Tupperware is a way to use for food storage. And same with things like sour cream containers. I've been using those to like organize things in some of my drawers at home, also for plant propagation. There's just so many ways to get creative with a lot of these things. So I like to think of it as thinking of the environment over convenience. The convenience of plastic, we've learned about the consequences of that, right? There's also so many plastic alternatives and zero waste options out there. We have refill stores as well, where you can even bring reusables. You just pay for the weight of what you're buying. So that's really helpful for things like cleaning supplies, things in the kitchen, things in the bathroom. My favorite refill store is Eco Now. They have a location in Costa Mesa as well as Anaheim. And so here's some examples here. I also want to note that, so some of these items, don't feel pressured to like be buying new things to be eco-friendly. Yes, there's to-go containers, for your utensils, but you can use your own utensils at home, put them in your own little bag or Ziploc, and now you've just made your own, right? Don't feel pressured to have to buy new things. The most sustainable thing you can do is use what you already have. And then when it's time that you need a new item, think of these things, as an investment. Do I really need this? Or, can I use something I already have at home instead? So just some more examples of things that I use in my bathroom and when I'm traveling, and some of these things too, a lot of this is going to actually save you money in the long run, like the bamboo razor blade. I bought that once. The little refill blades are so affordable. And, I think you can get like a pack of 50 for like $2 or $3. And then I'm not having to buy multiple plastic razor blades like every month, right? I was really upset when I learned about microplastics being in tea. And so a great way to combat that for packaged tea is buying loose leaf. Again, like this little bag's only $1. So here's just some different loose leaf tea options to hold your tea. This is kind of my go-to travel set. Using this little HelloFresh vinegar container now for like a face toner. Again, a little jam jar to hold some of my ibuprofen and just different items. I think something too that we forget about, right? We didn't always have plastic. A lot of these alternatives have existed, like bar soap, right? And oftentimes that's cheaper than our plastic soap anyway. I mentioned marine wildlife getting caught in ghost fishing gear. So if you or anyone you know consumes seafood, you can use the Seafood Watch website where you can actually type in what seafood you're craving, and they'll let you know the status of the fishery, if it's sustainable or if you should avoid it, as well as offer an alternative if it's an unsustainable fishery that has a similar flavor and texture. If you're eating out, I highly recommend asking where that seafood came from and how it was caught. I used to do this when I used to eat seafood. Oftentimes I found that, servers didn't know, but it's good because it brings awareness, right? Now they have to ask. Now they know where it's coming from, how it was caught, and hopefully it sends that message too that their customers want sustainable seafood. Again, advocating, writing letters, voting on bills that are coming out, especially right now. We have some for California specifically about single-use plastics in restaurants, and trying to really vote with our wallets, demanding that change, right? As consumers, we have that power to tell these companies and these industries that have the resources, have the money to make these changes that we want them. And educating, of course, how can we help solve this problem if people don't know about it? I mentioned earlier that Orange County, or that the United States produces the most waste in the world. It's about 4.5 pounds, per day per person. California is unfortunately the most waste producing state, and Orange County is the most waste producing county, almost triple the average. And so I think while that statistic, is a little daunting, and while I'm competitive and I like being number one, I don't want to be number one when it comes to waste production. But I think a lot of people are unaware, right? So we need to help spread this message, let people know that there's easy ways and things that they can do in their day-to-day life to help reduce that waste, and change that mindset. And then we can not be number one for that statistic. So if you've learned anything from my presentation and can share that one thing with a family or friend, that will help create this ripple effect of knowledge. Here's some more helpful websites. Like Kevin mentioned earlier, I created Plastic Me Not as a website and social media presence just to help educate on this problem and the solutions that we have. More ways to get involved with Orange County Coastkeeper. We have a lot of great programs. Right now, we're unable to do our monthly beach cleanups, but you can visit our website here to see how you can do your own neighborhood cleanup. And so thank you so much for your time. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Christina. That was great. Everyone, feel free to turn your cameras on. We can, any questions you have, I'm sure Christina would be happy to answer them. I know Gina had a question earlier about how to figure out the difference between which are actually biodegradable and not. Do you have those certifications by any chance? You can maybe leave in the chat so people know what to look for, or what the websites they can go to figure out which products they could find.
Let me drop that in the chat right now. So this is the certification company that I'm always looking for. I would say that my personal rule is that if there's no actual certification on something, then I assume that's greenwashing, right? If they don't have any type of a certification or labeling, then I'm not going to trust it. And then again, the TÜV Austria one is really my go-to because they're so strict and thorough. And I love that they have the difference of industrial compostability versus at-home compostability, right? Because most of our landfills, a lot of them don't have the right conditions for industrial composting anyway. So for me, I'm really looking for, is it at-home compostable? Because that means it'll compost in our backyard or whatever, composting machine that we have. I'd also like to say too that from what I've heard and from what I've seen so far in the research on any type of a bio-based or plant-based plastic, I would avoid that. It's still leaving little plastic pieces on some tests that have been done. And then even when it's in the landfills that have those very specific conditions, it releases a lot of methane. So it's also kind of causing even more problems just from the beginning research of what's out there right now.
Does that help clarify everything for you, Gina? All right, perfect.
Yeah,
I know
Great.
Ginny had a question too.
Yes. I think I took my mute off. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this was more of a comment more than a question, and that was regarding instead of using bottled water when people are traveling, that when you mentioned camping, that that you can get these things called a life straw, where you can just put the regular water. I mean, because the water that you're getting out of the tap wherever you go isn't like it's, poisonous, but if you don't like it or you just feel like you want to be safe, that you can put the regular water from the tap in and, just drink it like, a regular out of like a bottle. Or if you needed a lot of water, They have these gravity fed filters by Sawyer's, the one that I have. And I use it, of course, when I'm backpacking, but you could use it even just in a hotel room or wherever. And then, fill up the thing, it gravity fills, and then it has a container, and then you could fill your water bottle after that. So just to let people know that there are some really easy, super easy alternatives to buying that 32 pack of plastic, like that you were referring to.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you so much for reminding me about that. I'm going to drop that in the chat too. I actually just got a Sawyer Squeeze straw, like they have like their own little setup this summer for camping. And then I don't have what you have, but they have like an inflatable like jug, so you could like fill that up if you're your water source, and then just use the straw. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of the MSR Sawyer Squeeze Life straw. There's a lot of different companies are doing exactly the same thing. So not just for camping anymore, they're great for traveling as well. They pack well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, exactly. It could be for traveling. And I think the little Sawyer Squeeze thing that I got, maybe it was like $20, and it's good for like up to like 100,000 filters or something. Like it has a really long lifespan.
Yeah, not a lot of people are traveling right now, but I know my sister, pre-pandemic was traveling quite a bit to different foreign countries, and she would talk about how expensive water was, and they would always end up buying water. And so I was saying, instead of buying plastic bottled water, get one of these things, and that way you don't have to worry about that anymore.
I wish I had it before when I was traveling.
Yeah, I know. Save yourself a lot of money.
Very good point. Thank you for sharing that and reminding me.
I have a question, Christina. You had mentioned about Orange County being one of the higher, like in proportion to other counties, being one of. Do we know the reason why? I mean, we are a small county, so that's really disconcerting to hear that.
Yeah, I learned it from OCC's recycling center, and one of their webinars we did for Coastal Cleanup Day. I think it has a lot to do. He mentioned, we just have a lot of wealth disparity. So we have, as a county as a whole, we're known as like being a pretty wealthy county, right? But so I think with that, it's that mindset of, this thing's broken, I can buy a new one. Oh, that thing's done, I'll throw it away and I can buy a new one. I think that mentality is a huge contributing factor to that. But with that said, with that wealth disparity, we also have communities that are in the opposite situation, right? Where they're probably using sustainable practices, maybe more out of necessity because they have to be reusing items. And so I wish that mentality was just across the board, that we should be more sustainable and reusing things regardless of what our financial situation is. It's better for the planet, for us, for wildlife, for everything. And so I think something that we always tell our students when we're doing these presentations is to just not feel ashamed for shopping secondhand. If you have to thrift, if you're doing these practices out of necessity, these are good practices to have, right? Everybody should be reusing things and being as sustainable as possible, and donating things to help prevent it going from the landfill. We know that most of our plastic is ending up there anyway, and if we can prevent that in any way that we can, I think that's helpful. But yeah, I was very upset to learn that statistic.
I don't know if anyone has another question, but I had another question about when you were talking about, buying at thrift stores and things like that. And we did a whole presentation on that last summer called Fast Fashion with Abby. And it was really interesting. And one of the things that came up in the discussion, and I just wanted to bring it up again, and because we have different people here, is we were encouraging, people to go, reuse clothes and things like that. But in the other discussion, what came up was that people that really need those clothes, that those thrift stores were originally intended for, are actually not getting, their resources are actually being depleted because people that can afford to buy clothes at a store are starting to impact the thrift organizations. And I'm wondering, how do we remedy that? How do we equal that out so that we're, people that can afford to do something different don't take away from those that really have a true need? And that we're not taking those resources away from them.
That's a really good point. And I've seen some stuff about that too, kind of raising awareness for that. I think that one thing that we can all do is just taking better care of our clothes, right? Like I still have some, synthetic clothing material from a long time ago, like 10 years ago when I used to shop at fast fashion stores when I was younger and wasn't aware. But if we're taking better care of our clothes and treating them kinder, maybe washing them less, only when we need to, hang drying, doing these simple things, patching when we have holes or, resewing on buttons instead of just throwing them away. I think that can be huge and helpful in itself. Doing things like, especially for those that are able to, right, and that have these resources, doing like time capsule wardrobes where you're specifically know what you're wearing for what type of season. And so that way you don't feel like, oh, I need to get rid of all these clothes or like I need to buy more clothes. It's like you kind of have your set stuff. I wish that was another mentality we could kind of change, right? Clothing used to be so expensive and people only used to have like very few items because it was like such a luxury thing. And now it's become like, oh, I'm just going to have like 80 million types of clothes for every season and what's new for this season. So I wish we could kind of get out of that mindset, like, oh, it's summer and now I need this new outfit, right? So kind of changing that mindset, taking better care of our clothing. And then if you can afford it, like buying those better clothing materials, right? Buying jean, buying cotton, buying hemp, instead of then trying to find those items at a thrift store for those that really need to rely on that as a resource.
Could I add some tips to that? If you do specifically want to still thrift, I mean, if you can't afford the like sustainable fashion brands that are out there, the new ones, that's awesome. That'd be great too. That's another good option, to leave those thrift stores that, for people that really need them, that need more access, especially for size inclusivity, and also, affordability. So we would also recommend shopping at the secondhand stores that are more like consignment stores. So those can be more expensive, and they're also like where you can sell back your clothes as well. So it's a good way to not then take away from items that would be at like the more affordable thrift stores. So that was just the tip that I wanted to add.
Great tip. Great question.
I think Abby might have mentioned this when she did her presentation, but I know that another option is that if you're shopping at a certain thrift store, like a local thrift store, and you're depleting that resource a little, if you then donate your clothes back to that thrift store, then you're keeping the cycle going and you're kind of replenishing that resource. So I think that was something that Abby mentioned, but I thought I would mention it again.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that, right? If you're going to be buying something from this thrift store, like however many clothing items you buy, donate that many back. That would be wonderful. And then it's like saving the same space in your closet.
It's a good practice. And they tell you to do that anyway, right? When you buy something new, you should be getting rid of something. Well, they told you, I don't know if that's a good system anymore because, like you said, we need to just try to use what we have. One of the things that I was just enlightened to in the last couple months is it's on Facebook, and I know some of the younger people aren't on Facebook, but this group called Buy Nothing. Have you guys heard of that? So it's a Facebook group and they're in all different communities. So my sister down in San Diego is the one that told me about it. And she says, oh, I'm part of this group, and it's Buy Nothing, meaning B-U-Y, buy nothing. And it's basically it's like thrifting on Facebook. But what you're doing is you throw out, hey, I've got something, say, oh, I've got a bunch of reels of ribbon I'm not going to use anymore. And you're not sure, if it's best to send it to through a charity or whatever, because you're not sure what's going to happen to it. And it goes out to the community, and then, they kind of decide if they want it or not, and you leave it on your porch or wherever you decide to do it. And then you can also do a call out like, hey, I'm looking for, my sister said they were looking for a mirror for their garage, a workout area. And they got one and she painted it. And anyway, it's kind of a neat system. I think sometimes I was kind of looking at some of them like, okay, it looks tedious sometimes, but if you have really something that you are looking for very specifically, that's another way where maybe you could go that route. So then you're not impacting the thrift stores if you're looking for something very specific.
That's a great resource, and also similar to like the Nextdoor app, right? Where sometimes people are selling things, but oftentimes it's like, hey, we're moving, this is free. And it's within your community as well. So that I'll definitely check out the Facebook group too, though, but that's great to know. I love
it was good. And you have to apply, and it's in your neighborhood. So like I live in Irvine, so I'm in an Irvine one. And my sister's in San Diego, she's down in San Diego. So we know that, and the reason that you want to be in a neighborhood is obviously if you're going to have people come pick it up off, you don't want them to have to go, cities and cities to get to you. You want them to be, close by. So you can look it up. If you're on Facebook, you just look up Buy Nothing, and then it'll ask you where you live, and then they'll find the closest one to you.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of a new thing.
Awesome.
This was a great presentation. It really adds to many of the things that we've already been doing. And there was definitely some new stuff in there. And I know that you were hesitant to show some of the not so pretty things with the animals, but I think it's important for people to see that there is a true impact, and it's happening so regularly now. And you were mentioning about how, animals are eating the plastic, and many times the plastic tastes like their food, whether it's because of how the plastic is made. But also I wanted to add, and I'm not sure if you did, maybe you did, so I might be repeating, but sometimes when that plastic is in the ocean, it's floating around, and there's a lot of algae and micro animals that end up living on them, bryozoans and stuff that attach to it. And so that also adds to what tastes like food to them. So, they have, things on it now that are growing on it that, they trick those animals to thinking that it's food. So, it's unfortunate that that's happening out there. And I wanted to ask you too, because you were talking about the island. I have read, and this is internet, right? Not trying to know what the truth is and what is not on some of these gyres that are out there. I read somewhere that one of them was they could actually walk across the top of it. Now, is that a true statement? Have we heard that at any of those locations, that it's actually that dense that you could potentially walk across parts of it?
I haven't heard that for any of the ocean gyres yet, but I'll have to look into that. I have heard, though, for some of the landfill areas where it's most of our trash in some countries, like in Asia and parts of Indonesia and stuff, right, where they're getting all of our trash and they don't have any infrastructure for it. I just saw like a video where it's just like miles of trash that's like 2 stories high, that people are like, in the video, they're walking on top of it and they're pulling up, oh, this bag's from Pennsylvania. Oh, look, this is from Walmart. Oh, look, this is from like, Colorado, like, based on the packaging. So I have heard of that, but I have to look into if there's any parts of any garbage patches in the ocean that are becoming that dense. I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too, but I feel like I was the one who found that article, and it's been about a year probably, and I of course don't have it as a reference anymore, but I'm like, is that really, I mean I hope it's not, because obviously that's a bad situation.
I really hope it's not. That would also be I'd also really love to know how that could exist, like with all the currents and everything, right? Like moving the trash.
Like it would have to be, it'd have to be in fairly shallow waters, I would think, because it'd have to go down to the bottom, right?
Like, yeah, maybe like in a bay or something. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember it saying that, but again, the internet can be, it struck me like, really, you can walk across it? I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't take that chance, but so I was just curious if you had heard anything about that.
Not yet. Now I'm going to have to go down a wormhole. I'll let you know. Did you find it, Diana? You're on mute. Okay, I just can see your face. I'm like, oh no. Hopefully it doesn't exist.
Anybody else have any other questions for Christina? Now it is a little past 11. I'm not sure if we're happy to keep going or not, but
I think we should probably wrap it up, but I would like to encourage our, any of our friends that watch today that think this would be interesting we're going to be, putting this on our website. We're going to send a copy of it to Christina so she can share it as well. Pass this message along. This is all about education, right? So the more we can get that word out to people about what we're doing out there and how we can make some changes for the better. So please let people know. We will, the reason why we wanted you guys to put your names in there. So if anyone isn't already on our mailing list, if you want to put your name and your email into the chat, we'll add you to our mailing list. And but also know you can go to our website. We will post this on our website in our live stream area. So that should be done. Usually it takes about a week. So it'll probably be up in about a week. But if you'd like to get on our mailing list, you can put your name and your email in the chat and we will add you. But yeah, so just spread the word. I think this was an excellent. I thank you so much, Christina, for coming. I'll let Kevin take over.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important topic that we're not really faced with, or if you don't know about the situation, it's not anything you're ever going to think about. So you can get anybody out there to either watch the video or just share what you learned or what it can make a small difference that adds up of each person. And then if anybody here is not aware of OC Habitats, we have a lot of great events we usually do. So we're doing restoration projects every week that are open to the public. We do guided tide pool hikes and explorations. We'll be adding a inland guided hike as well. And we have plenty of great articles and other spotlight videos that we've done for our happy hours. So go on over to our website. It should be at ochabitats.org. I'll put it in the chat. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful Saturday. Let's all give a nice virtual round of applause to Christina for her time.
Thank you for having me, and the wonderful questions and discussion too.
And thank you for being so active and motivated in everything that you do. It's impressive to be a part of so many organizations and even kind of start your own just because of what you've seen around the world. So thank you.